I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this is a first deal episode where we walk through what it takes for someone to find, fund, and close on their first apartment complex. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you are probably trying to do exactly the same thing. So before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and the little notification bell to make sure you get notified every single time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. I'm very excited for today's show. It's one of our first deal series episodes, and we're actually not talking about a first deal today. We'll be talking about a second deal today. So I want to introduce everybody to Crystal Ribail, who's going to be with us talking about a 21-unit apartment complex in El Paso, Texas. So Crystal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Glad to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So 2 apartment complexes in very short order in El Paso. And the first one was 26 unit. The second one's 21. Like I said, I'm very excited to jump in. But before we do jump in, let's talk a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an idea of your background and walk us into kind of how you got involved in apartment investing.
I currently work a full-time W-2 job. I purchased my first home. It was just always told to me I did not want to pay rent for somebody else that is owning something and having a property after. So I purchased my first home when I was 18. Mm-hmm. I was under contract and closed when I turned 19. It was back in 2007. Wow. Likely I should not have been approved back when everyone was getting approved. I only lived in it for about a year. And then at that point, there were some issues and looking, I did not want to sell. I was like, if anything, I wanted to own a property. So I rented it out. It was rented out for 9 years. El Paso, Texas being a big military town where the property was in one of the prime areas of where the military loves to stay. So for most of those 9 years, it was rented out to military.
Nice.
I ended up purchasing an investment property that was almost like a duplex here in El Paso as well. And at that point, it was more passive. I was really focused on my W-2 job, growing my career within the corporate background, and it was more passive. So I had just long-term tenants in place. And it was until I got burnt out. It was during COVID, a lot of work, a lot of hours, probably working 60, 80-hour weeks. And I had paid off one of the properties and I was like, I'm going to be mortgage free by 33. That was my joke that I was telling everyone. And then at that point what can I do once I am mortgage free? And when I started looking into that, I was really burnt out with my corporate job, seeing how can I create more passive income for myself? How can I, retire myself? And I was looking at triplexes, duplexes, smaller multifamily. I started listening to more podcasts. And it wasn't until I listened to one where they were talking about apartments. And at that point, I realized that calculating the number, right, your financial freedom number, that likely the apartment is a route for me to go. So I told my agent, that is one of my really closest friends, if you know of any apartment complexes, 8, 12 units, let me know. I'm really interested. Some deals fell through on the triplexes, duplexes that didn't happen. And one day she's like, I have a 26 unit coming up. Are you interested? And from what I've learned from networking, books, podcasts, everything is that if it's going to get you through that door to your goals, just walk through that door and figure it out later, almost problem solve later. So I did. I took it. I said yes immediately, even though I knew that was probably way out of my my goal of as far as the amount, the price, the sales price. And I took it from there. I went from that property. I did partner with one other person on that property. We did. We can get into the details. I know we will get into the details of how we financed those properties. That deal went well. And the seller then decided that since that went well, there's another property he has, a 21 unit, that he was interested in selling. I initially said no. I was like, nope, the numbers don't make sense. The price he's asking for just doesn't make sense. And from there, it snowballed into, are you sure? Let's see how we can make this work through. But that's really where it started. And that happened about June of last year. So it's almost a year now. And how much I've learned in the past year and just the networking alone it's extremely valuable. I feel very new to this, but the more I talk to others, it does help me reassure myself that this is the right step to go in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love something about you is you're not afraid to take action. I think a lot of people have that problem, is they've convinced themselves that multifamily or that real estate in general is the way to go. But they have a hard time taking action. I mean, you said you bought your first home when you were 19, right? Wow.
Yes.
And, so mortgage free by 33, and then you got a couple extra, 2 apartment complexes under your belt now. And, mental math, you can't be much more than 33 right now. Right. So, I'm not gonna put you on the spot and ask you your age, but, I think
you're
that's
older now. I'm a year older.
Yeah. You're a little bit old. I'm way older, but I'm 40 something, but, so a lot of things that are good there is, you've taken action on a lot of things. You took control of a lot of things. Somebody came to you with this 26 unit and it's where you wanted to get. And I love what you said is like, yep, say yes now and figure it out later. It's a good opportunity. It's where you wanted to get. And then the 21 unit ended up following that one. But so let's talk about, you mentioned a partner who partnered with you on both of these projects. How did you meet him? Him, right?
It's him.
Okay.
Yes. I met him at my W-2 job. He no longer works there. He works with a different company now, still works full-time W-2 as well. But I knew that I wanted a partner that was interested in real estate as well and was going to help me crunch the numbers as well. I feel like I'm really good at numbers. I do analytic stuff for my current W-2 job as well. But I just wanted someone to just cross the T's, dot the I's, and make sure that I was analyzing everything correctly. And truly, I owe a lot of credit to what I've done. And the action I've taken is mainly the people that I've networked with, mentors I've talked to, and some of the books and education that I've done. Yeah. Is that being in apartment investing is a team. It's not you can take it on alone, but you're not going to get far.
Right.
It's going to be a lot on you. And my main goal is to get more time freedom. So I knew for sure I needed to at least bring on a partner. I didn't expect to get a second deal out of it. So at that point, it's been growing pretty quickly.
So you used to work with each other. How did you get from, working together to 2 apartment complexes? I mean, how did that develop, if that makes sense?
So he has approached me. He knew that I've always been into real estate investing, that I had some rental properties. I wouldn't talk about it much at my W-2. And I know now that is a mistake. I am now telling anybody and everyone that is listening to me at work at any time, if I can drop it in that I'm a real estate investor. Yeah. It does help build the confidence and trust for them to want a partner. So he knew me from the W-2 job. I was a leader of his at one point, a mentor of his at one point as well, helping him grow within his career. So I wanted to do the same with real estate investing. He was looking to purchase other properties as well, and get involved in it. So when my agent came to me with the 26 unit, I asked him if he was interested in going to walk the property with me. I had already vetted out some property management companies. So I also had the property management company because I knew from education that property management is one of the key things to do. So I knew I needed to have when we were going to go walk the property. So he walked the property with me, and immediately after he's like, I want in. What can I do? How can I get in? Let's do this. And that's probably the story of how that happened. But we've known each other for, I would say, about 9 years now.
All right. Well, let's just continue the story a little bit. So that first property, he says he wants in. Give us a little bit of an overview of that first property, because it very, very much pertains to how you found the second one. So just keep on going from that one, from there, and tell us a little bit more of that first one.
Okay. The first one was a 26 unit as well in El Paso, Texas. It's right close to the military base, the main entrance of the military base. It was $1.4 million. It's 26 units, has a laundry facility on site as well. The way that we structured it, because part of it was that I knew I could only, from a capital perspective, get something around an 8 to 12 apartment complex originally, is why when I met my agent and said that's what I wanted to do. So I knew initially that I was going to need to bring on some sort of partners, capital, or raise capital. And when we went to walk the property, I knew he also has a really good W-2 job as well. He's always been really good with his finances because we would talk about that at work.
Yep.
Just in general of, we don't want to get in debt with certain things. Credit card debt's really bad. So we knew from that aspect that if we were going to go into, we talked the numbers. And the way that we structured that first deal was with a local credit union and partial seller financing with that first deal. We were able to close on that first deal. We did our capital out of pocket. We split it 50-50 on the capital. And that deal went so well that it led to the second deal from the seller. He then mentioned he had the 21 unit. We knew he had some storage facilities, some other properties throughout the city as well. So we knew we wanted to keep that relationship going with the seller. He had that property. It's him and his wife managed it themselves. They didn't have a property management company. They don't have any kids that they plan to pass it down to. They were just looking to retire. So the way that we looked at the deal was, how can we make this a situation for us to get into apartments and, a win-win situation for both, for both parties or all parties involved, including the agent, right? So we talked through the numbers with what his number was. He was getting, he wasn't able to refinance his property, the seller, because he didn't have all his financials in order. So with that, we knew that we had a deal there, right? Off-market deal, seller in distress, and needed help, right? That's really what it is that we were trying to help him get out of the situation he was in to not want to manage the property anymore, to want to retire, but we wanted in. So we just continued with that relationship with the owner, able to close the first deal. Maybe less than a month after, he showed us the next deal. We initially said no. The sale price did not make sense because it's a 21 unit, but 6 units were under construction, and they had been under construction for 4 years. They were started and completely stopped. So
it doesn't sound like under construction. That sounds like, stop construction. Yeah, exactly. So,
Right. Stopped construction. Right.
So it was really a 15 unit with, the opportunity to finish the 6.
Exactly. And when they did the sales price, of course, they were doing it at what the potential amount that it can make. And we had to go back and forth and say, we can't put our money based on the potential. We understand it can be there, but it does take a lot of effort to get those 6 units completed, as well as, being able to put the money towards that, plus the closing, plus any other renovations that need to occur. At that sales price, it just didn't work for us. So he was willing to adjust the sales price, offer credits. We ended up originally doing the deal was 1.3 million, 21 units, a 20,000 credit at closing, and 4 months of no payment to seller financing. So we did structure that the same as the first. We did a bank financing with a local credit union, and then the seller took a second on the seller financing. So he played a part of doing so we wouldn't have to go so far down with the down payment with the bank, because we still had to come 20% down. And we did 4 months of no payment to the seller financing. So that was how it started. As we went through more due diligence, we went through appraisals, further inspections of the property, having multiple bids on finishing those 6 units. That's where further negotiations came into play.
Let's dial in on the 6 units a little bit more. Now that you have bids, let's talk about what condition were they in when you guys first looked at it?
First looked at it, the 6 units, 4 of them are about 80% complete. The other 2 were completely at the studs and framing. The construction completely stopped 4 years ago. So as we were getting bids, we did have some general contractors go and look at the permits and found out that none of the inspections occurred on those 4 that were 80% complete. So that was also something that we had to find out, how much is that going to take us to then, take down the sheetrock, get the inspections done. Do we need new plans? Do we need new approvals from permits? Luckily, one of the bids we got, the general contractor has a great relationship with some of the permits for the city, and they were able to break it out into doing it in 2s. So we're going to have a total of 3 that need to be 3 permits total out of those 6 units. And what they're going to do is they're going to only have to inspect the framed one, and then make sure that the electricians, the HVAC, all of the others that need to happen, the plumbing, they can take off a piece of one of the sheetrock and then make sure that everything looks in place with the inspectors, and then they'll be able to approve all 6.
Okay.
So that did change the bid a bit, which then we were able to use that to negotiate some further credits with the seller, and it ended up leading to reducing the sales price overall as well.
Yeah. So, okay, good point. Yeah, when you say they stopped construction, I was still wondering, how far did they get? And it sounds like they were far enough where, it's not too heavy of a lift to bring those back up to occupiable and get those certificates of occupancy on those. So,
Right.
All right. So you went through that process, you got bids, you used the bids to go back to the seller and say, hey, it's going to cost this much to bring these 6 units up. And oh, by the way, you forgot to get the inspections, so that's going to cost a little bit more. You renegotiated the price. And let's take it from there.
So we renegotiated the price because once we realized that it could potentially take a lot longer for the permitting, the inspections, and to get the certificate of occupancy. We went back with the seller to say, we need to either reduce sales price, we need to make concessions somewhere.
Yeah.
Now the numbers aren't making much sense. So definitely a learning lesson there. The seller decided to lower the price $75,000, as well as give an additional $10,000 at closing credit. And we still had the 4 months of no seller payment. So we were going to collect rents on the 15 units. While those were going to be under construction, we're going to complete the construction for those units. So that still the numbers made sense to us, and we continued on with the process.
All right. So
we were ready for closing.
Yeah, right. So a lot of goodness there, and a couple of things. You were very creative. You had a seller who's willing to work with you. You got seller financing on the first one, so you didn't have to put the full down payment down. Seller financing on the second one, to be able to get into another property without, exhausting your resources. So a lot of goodness there, a lot of creativity, and looking for mutual solutions. And I found this a couple of times. I was looking at a little mom and pop place. It was a 12 unit down the road from me. And the seller was looking for a seller finance because they were retiring and they were just looking for income without the hassle. And I think a lot of people in the situation, that's the type of people where seller financing works extremely well. Is,
Right.
The older mom and pops who are just looking to, hey, I want the same income. I don't want all the hassle. And if you can present them a seller financing option that gives them the income they want without the hassle, a lot of times that works.
Creating the win-win situations, problem solving for not just yourself, but the seller as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about getting this to the closing table. So any other big hiccups between, the renegotiation of the contract and getting to the closing table?
At closing, just to give some background on the structure of how it was, is that we did a $300,000 finance with the bank, and initially it was going to be $1 million finance with the seller. That was only because we wanted to come with little capital out of pocket. I was trying to solve that problem because the first deal we did was we did a lot of capital of our own out of pocket. So we only had to do 20% of the $300,000 for the bank, which is $60,000. But we also had the $30,000 credit. We knew we were going to get security deposits, prorated rent, prorated taxes, all of that to be brought in at closing as well. And then also the 4 months of no payment for the seller financing, we knew that we were going to be able to put more of our capital towards the renovation instead of towards the actual closing costs. And that was the goal for that. So at closing, everyone's there, bank, everyone signs. As far as on the buyer side, we didn't truly celebrate because the deal for the second one came so quickly that we didn't get to celebrate the first. So the second, we're like, we're going to go to dinner. We're going to celebrate and enjoy that we closed on the second one. And we are now owners of 47 units. And the fun begins, as everyone likes to say. As we were headed to dinner, we got a call stating that the seller refused to sign. We were shocked because everything was going well. We were even, starting the transfers with the property management company. They were already interviewing the new tenants, doing all the transfers for that as well. So we were shocked to hear that. And he is very old school when he does signing of the contracts. He doesn't like to do it on any online DocuSign. He does it in person, signs the forms. But he stated that he did not remember agreeing to certain amounts. So at that point, we needed to figure out again, another problem comes up. What do we need to do from here? Where do we go from here? And my biggest advice that I give to all the time is just take one day, at least sleep on it one night before you make any major decisions. So we talked through it during dinner. Dinner was not a discussion of celebrating, being happy. It was, what can we do? What are our options? We do have an attorney that we have for the both deals that we've had review all of our items. We immediately called him next day, talked through what our options were. He was unavailable because he was in court. So my brother's also an attorney, but he does not specialize in real estate. So went over with him. My partner did go over with some attorneys he was aware of too, to kind of go over our options to see what we can do. So at that point, we did know that we could go the litigation route, that it may take more time. And if that was something we wanted to do, the seller wanted us to then take on a third note because he did not want to agree to the 4 months of seller financing. He didn't remember doing that. And he wanted us to take on the interest for those 4 months on a third note, which came up to about $17,000. We basically said, can we just pay that at closing and just close the deal if that's the case? It didn't happen. It ended up happening that he then said, let's just change it to 2 months of no seller payment, no seller financing payment. So we ended up agreeing to that, and we closed the very next day.
Okay.
But some of the hiccups is celebrating too soon. And initially with this entire deal, we had said no from the get-go. And along the way, we had many different challenges. So at closing, until I was signing, I knew that, I was like, is this really happening? We're really getting the second one. And we came with so little out of pocket to close that I was very, very shocked that we were able to do it. And then, the little hiccups that occurred, I was like, maybe it's not meant to happen. Maybe we just continue with the first and move on. But we were able to make a deal with the seller, and it worked out for everyone.
Nice. So you guys got 47 units with, not a whole lot out of pocket because you guys were able to structure things properly, work with the seller, and come up with a win-win situation that ended up working for everybody. Awesome. I think that's great. So, so how's the 21 unit come since closing? And let's see, how long ago did it close? About a month ago?
We closed April 26th, 2022. So a couple weeks now. It's almost a month.
Almost a month. So how's it going so far?
It's good. It's going. We had everything. I plan everything. I try to plan as much as I can. And I know that there's the joke that if you plan, there's so many things that can occur, but I try to at least plan for that. So we immediately got the general contractor to start going in, getting the units to where we need, the 6 units, because we knew it was a very times even smaller from the seller financing payment. To get those units ready. We are going to have those 4 completed. We're hoping within the next 2 weeks from what we're getting from the general contractor updates. They already have the HVAC. Inspections are occurring this week as we are on this call. And we're hoping to have those certificate of occupancy within the next 2 weeks. Luckily, the relationships with the permits with the city, they were able to agree to get these units done 2 at a time as opposed to all 6 at once. So they're going to give us those certificates of occupancy for those 4 units first as we complete the final 2.
Nice. So far, so good. You'll have those units come up 2 at a time, start renting those out, start getting in more income. And then, in another month, start paying the seller back, start paying off that loan. So awesome. So are you going to be mortgage free on 2 properties by 43 this time?
I wish. So what ended up happening, even just to get into it and using my capital, and one thing that I talked to many about is that I ended up taking out an equity loan on the one that was mortgage free on one of my investment properties. It's almost like a duplex. It's 2 units. So I did take out an equity loan on it. Luckily at a 3.75% interest rate. So it was when interest rates were really low to take out that equity to put in these deals. So it was definitely a learning lesson because I thought it was so silly of myself to have paid off, become mortgage free without learning how much, real estate. And I, at that point I was like, I know I can write off some of the interest. I can write off, there's certain things that can be written off. And being mortgage free isn't always the smartest thing to do, but it was definitely a lesson learned.
Something I learned a long time ago was there's a metric called return on equity, and being mortgage free is extremely safe, and every penny that comes off the property is going to be cash flow, which is nice. But the return on equity, you have to look at how much money you have locked up in the property and look at your opportunity costs, So once you start looking at it from that angle, things change a little bit. And if you've got a couple $100,000 locked up in equity, now the question is, what's my return on that equity, and how else could I deploy that equity to make better returns for myself? And that's something that it took me a long time to figure out, but. And when I did figure that out, oh, by the way, I sold 2 houses because I couldn't refinance them at the time. I could have refinanced them, but I couldn't refinance them and still cash flow. But anyway, I think that decision is going to be one that you're very happy with, long term. So, all right. So what's next for you?
For me, I honestly want to continue learning, networking, continuing going to the Friday happy hour sessions that you host as well, and other networking events. As I closed on my first deal, my goal was to go to a commercial real estate networking event. I went to one in Denver this past year as well, in February, and I realized there's just so much that I can learn. I think I learned a lot just doing the deals. I know taking action, you learn a lot, but there's so many things. Just the return on equity that you mentioned right now, it's a different way of looking at it too. Not just the cash flow, not just the debt that you get, and the write-off, the tax benefits from that. But what's next for me is I am looking to exit my W-2. That is the goal. I wanted more time freedom. I am waiting a little bit to make sure the property stabilized. Yep. I have already told my agent I am not ready for the third yet. But she's already looking for a third. She's like, and we almost might have one soon. We had looked at one last week. I said I wanted to give myself more time, but that also made me realize that maybe I need to look at getting more partners or growing into something more, because we do have property managers. It's me and my partner. Both of us still work our W-2 job. But I really do enjoy helping others learn as well. That's how I was able to meet this partner. But I also want to learn from others that are doing larger deals than me, and having more time freedom, that are being able to do both. Because I am very passionate about this. And it's not just, from the real estate perspective, in any aspect of becoming financially free and helping others understand that they don't need to go the route of being an employee all the time or doing the 9 to 5. They can look at different options to be more flexible with their schedule and having more time for their family. And that's truly what I want to do. And what's next for me is to have more time for my family once I leave my W-2, and helping others learn and grow and continue in my own education.
Awesome. And I think you're very well set up. I mean, 47 units, pretty much with one other person. So, if you're at the point where you want to scale, you've got track record already. You've got a lot of history, and track record really matters in this business. And, walking into your broker or a different broker with 47 units already under your belt is going to start the conversation a lot differently. Same for investors. If you ever look on bringing passive investors in, that track record you've built already is going to pay a lot of dividends down the road. So that
was important to me to become a subject matter expert, is what I would say. And this, I wanted to learn. That's a big part of my, what I like to advocate for myself, is that I want to learn it before I teach others. Let me take the risk before I bring others to take the risk. That's just how I've always been. So once that happens, I know it's usually the time where I have friends, family, even coworkers, clients sometimes asking me, how did you do that? What are you doing? And it was a hobby to me. And now it's become more than that. So it's interesting how many times I get asked that, I have some money. I want to do something with it. Let me know. Here's my number. Let me know. And it's a great feeling to know that I'm able to help others as well. But I would not have been here if it weren't for others, that the advice that I listen to that have done it before. There's many times at a younger age, you look at it, you're like, no, I'm going to do it my way. You learn it the long way in that case. But I truly try to take in what some people that I aspire to be like, or people I look up to, and try to take their advice and make sure that their time, that I use their time and I'm taking action and not just, listening to what they're having to say. I want to make sure that I'm using it, and hopefully making them proud with the advice that they gave me and taking that action of what I've done.
Awesome. So 2 more questions for you. And this is my favorite one of this type of podcast episode. What advice would you give? And speaking of, helping people along, but what specific advice would you give somebody who was, a year or so behind you?
My advice that I give in all areas is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's many others that were in your situation at one point. And just don't be afraid to ask for help. The worst thing that can happen is they don't respond. They don't answer. I asked so many people for help during my process of learning. There's so many that they're like, you reached out to who? And I was like, yeah, I mean, if they don't answer, they're just a person.
Yeah.
And they did answer. It took them a little longer because I'm sure they have so many questions from so many people, but they did end up answering. Some of them answered, but it did help reassure what I was doing was in the right direction. So truly don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, the worst thing they can do is just not respond to you. But if you ask multiple people, you're likely to get an answer from someone.
You get somebody. Yeah. It's just it's a numbers game at that point, so definitely ask for help. I appreciate that very much. And last question, how can listeners learn more about you?
They can find me on Instagram, social media, almost on any social media platform, including LinkedIn, under Crystal Ribail, R-I-B as in boy, A-I-L. Or if you ever have any questions or need anything, you can also email me at cdrassetmgmt@gmail.com.
All right. So appreciate you coming on the show today. Thanks very much. And I'm excited to, eventually hear about number 3 pretty soon. So I know you're not ready for it, but, whether it's 6 months or a year from now, excited to hear about it.
Thanks you so much, Brian. I appreciate everything you're doing.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description or go to thetribeoftitans.info and we'll see you there.